Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for that kind introduction. It's certainly an honor to be here with you today. So on behalf of the ICCT, I just wanted to extend a thank you to all the conference organizers for inviting us to this very important meeting. Um, so it's clear that we're really at a pivotal time here in India in terms of vehicle emissions as well as efficiency policy. So it's really a pleasure to be here with you, and I look forward to learning a lot over the course of the 2 days. And on a personal note, it's really great to be back here in India and here in Delhi. Um, so a couple days ago, as I was packing for the trip, my 3-year-old daughter came over and asked, Daddy, why are you going to India? And so I said, well, I'm going to this conference, this big meeting, and we're going to talk about how truck and buses are getting more environmentally friendly and are going to use less energy. And I asked her, do you know why it's important that we're smart about how we use energy? And so she thought about it for a little while, and she came back and said, so mommies and daddies can have more energy to play with their kids? So the wisdom of 3-year-olds. So lucky for you, I'm not going to be talking about mommy and daddy energy today, but I am going to be walking through some of the evolutions in technology that we're going to be expecting as regulations roll out both for BS6 as well as on the efficiency side. So in terms of what I'm going to be covering today, it's 2 main topic areas. First, I'm going to start with a discussion about the transition to BS6 and what that will mean in terms of technology. But I'm going to try and move through those slides fairly quickly because we have a full slate of really terrific presentations throughout today that's going to cover that topic area in a lot more detail. So then I'm going to turn my attention to some of the work that we've been doing over the past 2 years looking at efficiency for trucks and buses in India, and what are some of the solutions that we expect can pay dividends out into the future. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the ICCT, the International Council on Clean Transportation is a nonprofit research organization, and our mission is to work directly with environmental regulators around the world to work on policies that will dramatically improve the environmental performance and efficiency of cars, trucks, buses, as well as marine and aviation. We have about 40 full-time staff, and we have offices in San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Berlin, and now Beijing, an office we just opened here in the last few months. So starting in on the first topic area, looking at some of the technology implications of transitioning to BS6 standards. But I just wanted to really emphasize that this is a really big deal in the leapfrog from BS4 to 6 standards. It's really the first time in the world that this has happened, a country going directly to Euro 6 equivalent standards. And we at the ICCT have been recommending this type of policy jump for many years in a number of different countries. So we're very excited to see how things play out here in India as kind of like a living laboratory, and seeing how things play out. We can see emissions getting much bigger over time, and premature deaths growing in conjunction with that. But luckily, in the move to BS6 standards, we're expecting the premature deaths to dramatically decrease. So it's certainly not hyperbole to say that the introduction of these new standards are going to save thousands of lives all across the country here. So thinking about what BS6 means in terms of the actual legislated emission limits, this figure here shows both for PM and NOx emissions the decrease that BS6 will entail. So if we look at the right-hand side of the figure, the commercial vehicle limits, the reductions are on the order of 50 to 70% for PM and upwards of 90% for NOx. So we're expecting significant emission reductions as a result of the program. But perhaps, or not perhaps, certainly much more important than what happens in the laboratory, what we really care about is how these vehicles perform in the real world. So we at the ICCT, we've done a number of studies to look at how vehicles perform in the real world. And this particular study looks at emissions from Euro 4, 5, and 6 vehicles. So when we look at the figure, the lines, the colored lines across the figure are for Euro 4, 5, and 6 standards, so the green, the purple, and the red. And what really stands out is that all of the Euro 6 vehicles are at or below what we would expect based on the emission limits. But the emissions for the Euro 4 and 5 vehicles are really all over the map. And much times, they're often much higher emissions than we would expect in the real world. So one of the reasons that the Euro 6 or BS6 standards are going to actually provide those real-world benefits is that in addition to the emission limit reductions, there's some additional features of the regulation that make it more robust. And these features include particle number limits to help ensure diesel particulate filters, in-use conformity testing, enhanced OBD, as well as some more representative test cycles that capture more of the low load, low speed operations, which are so critical, particularly when you're thinking about NOx emissions. So I just wanted to provide a very quick overview of some of the technology evolutions moving from BS3, which is where most commercial vehicles in India are certified at that level currently, and going forward onto BS4 and then 6. So there are two distinct pathways to get to BS4. The first being based on exhaust gas recirculation and then using after treatment to control the PM emissions. The second is based on selective catalytic reduction, where you tune the engine for high NOx emissions and then clean those up in the SCR after treatment system. And then what we've seen in other markets, as you move to the Euro 6 equivalent standards, these two pathways tend to converge. But like I said, we're going to have lots and lots of details about technology and evolutions going to BS6 throughout the day. So I myself, I'm very curious to learn about some of the solutions and what's going to be most applicable and work well in the Indian market. So when we think about the benefits of the BS6 regulation, that's really confined to just new vehicles and engines. But we really know that there are thousands of trucks and buses on the road that are emitting and emitting at often a very high rate. So we at the ICCT have been looking at different scenarios for how you can reduce emissions from the in-use fleet. So this particular study that we did, we looked at a scenario that combines BS6 standards for new vehicles along with a early scrappage and replacement program for the in-use fleet. And when you look at the combined benefits of those two programs in conjunction, the benefits are really significant compared to what you can achieve just by doing emission limits for new vehicles. So thinking about a post-BS6 India and where the inventory is going in terms of PM and NOx. So now that India has really tackled the on-road side in terms of regulation, and we can see the impacts, the expected impacts over time for both PM and NOx for the on-road sector here are expected to decrease over time. But that's really contrasted with what's happening on the non-roads portion of things. So we can see exponential growth is expected for the non-road sector in a business-as-usual scenario. So I'm really excited for tomorrow afternoon session, I believe, on non-road emissions and policy opportunities in that space. Because it's clear we have to really tackle all of these modes if we want to dramatically reduce vehicle pollution. So I just wanted to put this slide in to encourage you to explore some of the research that we've done in this area. We've been active in India for a number of years. So I believe you'll be getting these slides as part of your conference package, so no need to feverishly scribble these URLs. So that brings me to my next topic about efficiency. And we've been working over the past 2 years to try and understand what are the technologies and technology packages that are going to work well based on the Indian context. So first, I want to acknowledge our project partner on this research. We've been very fortunate to partner with Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, which is part of the Department of Energy laboratory network in the U.S. So the ICCT is focusing on the baseline technology characterization and technologies out into the future, as well as per vehicle technology costs. And then Lawrence Berkeley is looking at the fleet-wide implications of different technology deployment scenarios and what that will mean in terms of fuel savings and total cost-benefit analysis. So before diving into the technology discussion, why should we care about fuel use and emissions, CO2 emissions from trucks and buses in India? And this figure really shows, so we have truck emissions here in green and then bus in red. So out to 2050, we can see a pretty dramatic increase in both fuel consumption and CO2 in the absence of any strong action in this space. So another reason why fuel consumption in India particularly, looking at the commercial vehicle fleet, is so significant is that when we compare India to some of the other major markets around the world, the share of fuel use and CO2 emissions in India is much higher than these other markets. So nearly 70% of total fuel use and CO2 emissions from on-road heavy-duty or from on-road vehicles can be attributed to trucks and buses. So at least to us, the case for action is very clear. So now jumping into some of the unique aspects of the Indian commercial vehicle market. One of the biggest thing that jumps out right away when comparing India to some of the other major markets is engine size. So this figure shows sales by engine volume bends. And we have the sales for India here in red, and virtually all of the engines sold for India for the commercial vehicle space are less than 9 liters. And that's very different than the other markets, particularly the US and the EU, where the bulk of the sales are 11 liters and above. So we're going to see how that engine size really plays out in terms of how the vehicles are actually operated. Brings me to my next slide, which shows another unique feature of the Indian market, which is very much related to having smaller engine size, is that commercial vehicles on average tend to drive much slower in India than in other markets. The first time I visited in India last April, I was really just very interested to see all of the trucks with this really heavy loads and traveling at much slower speeds than I'm used to seeing back home in the U.S. So those are two of the most unique aspects of the commercial vehicle market in engine. So smaller engine sizes and much lower average speeds. We're going to see how that plays out in terms of looking at what efficiency technologies are going to be the most effective. So because operating conditions are so different between the various regions, it follows that the opportunities for various technology areas are going to be different from country to country. So this slide has a lot going on, and I'm not going to go through cell by cell, but the take-home message here is that when doing regulatory design and thinking about efficiency opportunities for commercial vehicles, you really have to take local context into account. It's super important when figuring out what technologies and packages are going to make the most sense. So what are the areas on a vehicle that can be improved to increase efficiency? So in general, we think about 7 broad areas that you can look at in terms of technology for improving efficiency. So over the next few slides, I'm going to get into some results and discussion about which of these technology areas are going to be the most ripe for improvement and going to provide the biggest efficiency improvements for the Indian commercial vehicle fleet. So Now I'd like to discuss some of our analytical methods and how we went about characterizing trucks and buses in India. And the first foundational step as part of our simulation modeling was having a good characterization of the engine. And we were very fortunate to acquire an India-specific engine map um, from a technology consultant. The specifications for the engine are shown here in the table, and I just wanted to highlight two features of the engine. So the first is that this is a 6-liter engine. And the reason why that's important is because in the Indian market for trucks and buses, this 6-liter volume is the top-selling engine size and represents roughly a third of all vehicles sold, uh, all trucks and buses sold in India. The second key thing to point out is that this is an EGR-based engine map. If you recall from previous slide, there's an EGR pathway and then there's also an SER pathway. So for this particular modeling exercise, we had access to this EGR-based fueling map. So here are the baseline specifications for the vehicle types that we wanted to model. So we came up with 3 vehicle types, so a 40-ton tractor trailer, 25-ton rigid truck, and a 16-ton transit bus. And our approach in doing this exercise was to try as closely as possible to match the specifications in our modeling software with an actual vehicle model on the road. So what we did is we did a market analysis, looked at some of the top-selling models in each of these 3 segments, and we picked a vehicle to design our simulation model after. So I'm not going to go through the entire table, but I will point out that for all 3 of these vehicles, they use the same engine. So when we were going through our market data, we were really interested to see that this particular engine size, so this 6-liter, 134 kilowatt engine, tends to show up across a number of different platforms. So it was very fortunate for us in terms of getting the most use out of that one engine map. We were able to create 3 different vehicle platforms based on that one engine map. And I'll mention quickly that we did all of our modeling using autonomy software, which was developed by Argonne National Lab in the US. So after we created the 3 baseline vehicle models in simulation, we needed a drive cycle, which to exercise these vehicles and evaluate their performance. And we didn't find anything in the literature for trucks and buses that was suitable. So we decided to create a new cycle based off of the World Harmonized Vehicle Cycle. So you can see here in the figure, basically what we did is we just adjusted the curve downwards. More or less, we set a cap at the maximum vehicle speed at about 60 kilometers per hour, which seemed to kind of match anecdotal evidence. And in our discussions with fleets and OEMs, that kind of a cap made sense. Finally, the last thing we did in terms of drive cycles is we wanted to account for the fact that the 3 vehicle types are operated differently. So we use weighting factors for each of these 3 mini-cycle segments of the WHVC to account for those difference in operating parameters. So I just wanted to quickly mention that throughout the project we were really fortunate to get some really great support and feedback from a number of key Tier 1 suppliers here in India. For the sake of anonymity, I won't mention the exact companies, but just wanted to acknowledge that we certainly had a lot of support in making sure that our assumptions for the baseline, as well as looking out into the future, that our assumptions were reasonable. So now turning to some results, I first wanted to start with a US example just to provide some context. So this research is based off some work that we did last year to support the US EPA and the Department of Transportation rulemaking process for their Phase 2 program. And so we did some simulations for the tractor trailer over a typical North American drive cycle. And this chart here shows the breakdown in energy losses over that cycle. And what we see is that the engine really dominates with about 60% of the losses, followed by aerodynamics at about 20%, and then tires, which make up about 15% of the losses. So together, those three technology areas really account for 95% of the overall loss picture. So those three technology areas are really critical for U.S.-based tractor trailers. That's really contrasted with our India results. So we see here, we looked at an India type tractor trailer over the WHPC India cycle. And the biggest thing that jumps out is the fact that the contribution from aerodynamic drag is much, much lower in the case for India. And we'll see over the next few slides how the slow speeds in India really contribute to aerodynamics being a much smaller part of the overall picture. So this figure is really a qualitative assessment of the efficacy of aerodynamic and tire technologies as a function of average vehicle speed and payload. So what we see on the x-axis here is as average speed increases, the efficacy of aerodynamic technologies is maximized. And when we look at the payload dimension, as weights get heavier and heavier, tire technologies tend to become more important in the overall energy loss picture. So when we think about the Indian conditions, so lower speeds and higher loads, tire technologies are really going to be an important part of any efficiency technology rollout. So in this slide here, I just wanted to show some results that we did looking at comparable reductions in aerodynamic drag and rolling resistance drag and how those reductions translated to overall fuel savings. So we looked at the same three vehicle types, but over 4 different cycles. And really the take-home message here is that tire technologies or a reduction in tire drag provides much larger benefits than comparable reductions in aerodynamic drag. So in this slide shows how we developed the technology packages for each of the 3 vehicle types. And looking at the column headings, those are the major technology areas that we looked at. And as you go down the rows for each technology area, you're getting increasingly efficient technologies. So I'm going to walk through the progression for tractor trailers, and it was really a similar process for the rigid truck and the transit bus. So we have the baseline, package 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So we looked at 8 different technology packages for each of the 3 vehicle types and wanted to see how these technology packages performed over the WHPC India cycle. So this slide shows the results of that analysis, and we can see the various performance of each of those technology packages versus the baseline, which is shown in blue here. So you can see the kind of stair-step cascade down as you move from package 2 through 8. And by the time you get all the way to package 8, which is the most aggressive scenario, the reductions in fuel consumption are in the order of 35 to 45%. So from our perspective, there's certainly lots of opportunities for technologies to improve the efficiency for trucks and buses here in India. So where we're currently at in the research is that we're integrating cost into the equation. We all know that costs really drive everything. So we are doing cost estimates for each of these technologies and packages. And we're very excited to finish up that work here in the next month or 2. And I'll be eager to share those results. So just some quick summary remarks. Certainly the leapfrog to BS6 is a tremendous step for India. We want to commend the regulators here for their bold leadership in this space. It's going to provide significant air pollution and health benefits for the country. And second, there are substantial opportunities for efficiency improvements for trucks and buses here in India. We really think that engine and tire technologies are really going to be at the forefront of any technology scenario looking out into the future, at least initially. And like I mentioned, we're really excited to finish up our cost-benefit work, and I look forward to sharing that in a number of venues, hopefully. I'd just like to thank you all for your attention.